Good. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Firstly, hello to the audience who have joined us virtually, and also hello to the YouTube channel, people who will be watching us at whatever time of the day they are. Massive thanks to Harriet and Jane for joining us this evening. It's an honour to have the pair of you here. And Adam, huge thanks to you for assisting with this event. Well, without further ado, can I just say to the audience, please put your questions in at any point. I'm going to stay here and field your questions using the Q&A function along the bottom. If you want to put any comments at all in the chat function as well, I'll be keeping an eye on that. But other than that, and Adam's in charge. So without further ado, can I hand over to the brilliant Adam Hamdy?
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm in charge apparently, so if it all goes off the rails, it's my fault. I am really pleased to be talking to Harriet Tyce and Jane Casey today. I'm going to give a little introduction and then we'll get straight into the conversation. Harriet Tyce studied English at Oxford and did a law conversion course, and I just have to ask why. That will be one of the questions later on. She practiced as a criminal barrister for nearly a decade, and then did an MA in creative writing at the University of East Anglia. She's the author of the bestseller Blood Orange, and her latest book is The Lies You Told, which is your second book. Jane Casey is an award-winning author. In 2015, she won the Mary Higgins Clark Award for the Stranger You Know, and Irish Crime Novel of the Year for After the Fire. In 2019, Cruel Acts was chosen as the Irish Crime Novel of the Year at the Irish Book Awards and was a Sunday Times bestseller. And her latest book, which publishes tomorrow, is The Killing Kind. Did I get that right? Do I get thumbs up from both of you on that? That's
absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. Fair. Here we are.
There they are.
Both books are both, really, really brilliant books. I am going to just ask you first, Harriet. What on earth possessed you to do a law conversion course? You were on the right path there.
Literally no idea. Literally no idea. I was thinking about this earlier. That I think that I didn't avail myself of the careers services as much as I could have done to explore different job options. I sort of thought, right, I've got an English degree, journalism, teaching, or I suppose law, and I didn't want to be a journalist and I didn't want to be a teacher. So I did a law conversion course, and that and bar school were, I have to say, two of the worst years of my life. I mean, I've never hated either a subject or quite a lot of the people as much, ever. I mean, there are lots of lovely barristers, don't get me wrong, but there are quite a few who are less than lovely. And trying to cram in a 3-year law degree into 1 year is actually quite a big ask. So I kind of didn't, and I failed 2 of the 6 subjects and had to retake them. And then bar school was, it was absolutely insane. I did enjoy aspects of it, but it's been great that I've been able to repurpose it. It felt like such a waste. And the fact that I've been able to repurpose it now into the books and create a second career has just been amazing. Bye, Adam.
Adam just had us.
I'm sorry, that was obviously a really boring answer. He's just gone.
Where Adam is his best Wi-Fi position in the house. So
I'm sorry for that. I went out there, didn't I?
You did.
It's all right. We can talk among ourselves. It's fine.
I think I'm back now then. And Jane, just how did you get into crime writing then? What was your path there?
Well, Harriet and I have the same sort of background in that I did English at Oxford as well, and got to the same point, having got my degree, of suddenly going, oh, I have no idea what to do with this. What do you do with an English degree? I did try the career service. They weren't very helpful, so I don't think you missed too much.
That's good to know.
And I really just loved, I was fascinated by the business as much as anything else of publishing. And I thought, nobody becomes an author. Like, that's just, not something that ever happens to anyone. So I would really like to work in the book world. And I ended up being a children's books editor. And that was, you know, a really lovely niche to occupy. But obviously it wasn't speaking to something deep within me that wanted to write about murder and death and, you know, the dark side of life. So I just found myself drawn towards that after a while. I mean, there's a limit to how many kind of books about bunnies you can put together without thinking about murder, it turns out. So that was my background, that I sort of went Oxford publishing and then slid into crime.
What is it, do you think, about writing about murder that's kind of so attractive and appealing to you personally? I mean, what keeps you interested? What keeps you going back to crime?
I mean, I just think they're the best.
I'm not accusing you of anything.
No, well, you know, you wouldn't want to, Adam. I mean, you know, I've killed before. I mean, in the books. I just really, I find it fascinating. I love the dark side of life, and I love, you know, toying around with characters who you shouldn't really like, but you find yourself liking. And I find the stories very satisfying. You get a resolution, which I find important. I like to write towards something that isn't ending. I don't really know how literary novelists do a sort of a mood piece to sort of drift to a beautiful ending. I would just be sitting there going, and then what happens? So it's something that I really love. And when I was at Oxford, I met a man who I ended up marrying, who became a criminal barrister. So that's sort of my view of the world of crime, really, that I have this kind of amazing encyclopedic knowledge of it through my husband, because he's involved in the police and at the criminal bar, so he's sort of an encyclopedia. So I mean, the whole, like, everything was pointing towards go and write crime novels. Like, if I had had a magic 8-ball, it would have said, hey, why don't you think about crime novels? But it still took me a while to get there. It still took me a while to realize that was what I wanted to write. So.
Collectively, do we know how many people we've killed over the years?
Oh God, no, I lost count on about book 3.
Go on, give it a go, Harriet. How many?
I think there were 3 in the first one, and then there's 2 in the second one, or maybe 1.5. Can't quite remember. I mean, because I'm not doing procedurals, so they don't sort of open with a murder. It's just a question of you know, it's more people die. I mean, the new one I'm editing at the moment, that does open with a body, and that's sort of, and it kind of unfolds from there, which is a slightly different direction. But I mean, it's satisfying as well, because you can sort of turn them into your own personal revenge narrative, and torture and kill off the people that have annoyed you. So, you know, it's not a bad mechanism for that either.
Wow. Adam, how many of you murdered in your time?
Oh, hundreds.
Gratuitous.
Yeah, I write action thrillers, so people, you know, I have kind of big catastrophic events happening, and yeah, I mean, you know, Private Moscow, I think, actually no, Private Rogue with Patterson, that's probably got the highest body count. Lots of people die in that, so yeah, it's yeah, I've lost count, but I think, Harriet, you're absolutely right. You know, the revenge fantasy is. It's good, it's satisfying, better on the page. But coming back to the lies you told, Harriet, I'm always, you know, wary of giving away too much, because obviously you don't want to spoil it. People are going to read the book. But Sadie Roper, the you know, your protagonist, kind of is picking up the pieces after a big life change and moves back, and puts her daughter Robin into a new school, and is drawn into a you know, sort of really important court case, and you know, gets into the whole mum's at the school gate kind of situation with this brilliant character, Julia Burnett. I just, you know, what was the inspiration for this book? Where did it come from? You know, how much of it is drawn from real life experience, and how much of it is sort of, you know, a flight of imagination?
11 years of primary school, essentially. And obviously the characters are composite and exaggerated, and no kind of real kind of resemblance to true life. I would say that, and I think I need to say that. But no, I found Schoolgate's politics quite stressful. You know, so dealing with drop off and pick up and the competition, and a lot of people who, you know, may have stopped working, and so they put all their energy that they might have used in the office is actually now being used in some sort of quite machinating and tricky way. And safe to say I didn't enjoy it, but I did think at some point it might be quite fun to and quite cathartic to sort of take the worst of it and crank it up and create this, you know, obviously over the top and slightly gothic scenario, but one that could happen. And you know that there are various aspects of the behaviors which you know you do see more in terms of how people behave. I mean, say in American college and all the admissions scandals there, but yeah, there's no getting away from the fact that people can, especially where their children are concerned, behave very, very badly indeed. And it was fun in aspects. It was definitely quite fun to write.
Well, I mean, we live in a town that's got 2 grammar schools, and I could really identify with that whole, you know, do anything that you can, do whatever it takes, because we have people that move into the town when there's the admissions window, and they literally, you know, wealthy people from out of the area will come and rent a house for a few months just to get their kids that little advantage in terms of being in the catchment. So I could really, you know, that obviously it goes a bit more to the extremes, but I could really identify with that. And then, you know, Jane, in the Killing Kind, it's a book about your central character, Ingrid Lewis, who has in the past defended a stalker, and again, not wanting to, you know, give too much away, he kind of comes back into her life in a big way, and no one's quite, well, she's not quite sure whether he's friend or foe. And just what, you know, where did that come from? Because it's really what really fascinated me about it wasn't the kind of stereotypical portrayal of a stalker. It wasn't a, you know, this guy is a bad guy. There was that kind of gray characterization. I just wondered where that came from.
It was like the first thing that I thought when I was thinking about the book was I want to make a bad guy who you really root for. So that was that's sort of where that character originated. And I did have a moment after I finished, I think, the second draft, where I got in touch with my agent and said, I think I've written the wrong book, because I should have just written about the stalking, and that should have been, like, instead of that being in the before times of the book, that should have been the focus. So she talked me down anyway, because I think we were all kind of, it's quite hard to come up with a new spin on a stalking novel. And for him to have sort of done, you know, he's obviously been a very damaging presence in her life, but then he sees himself as a hero. So I thought, well, what happens if you let him be a hero? And, you know, this is somebody you can never trust and should never trust, but what happens if you have to trust him? So that was the origin of that story. I mean, I think I'm always interested in how women might have a slightly different experience of doing a particular job than a man would. So I thought, you know, barristers have quite a close relationship with their clients sometimes. And for men, you know, there's no sort of issue with, very often, with them sort of becoming obsessed, but it's so easy for women to find themselves being the target for someone's unwanted attention, and how they manage that and how they kind of navigate that, and how different the job is for them was really what gave me the original idea.
Did you do much sort of research into stalking and the psychology of it, and you know, kind of looking at sort of behaviors of those kind of people, or was it mainly just from?
There's a huge amount of information out there about stalking now, I think, because it's such a huge, it's a real problem for the police, because there are all these tiny little incidents that add up to a very dark picture. But actually, if you're the victim of them, then you're sort of ringing the police and saying, somebody has put something in my letterbox, or somebody has left a note on my car, or, you know, something that isn't really a crime in itself. And I know that they've done a huge amount of work in trying to make a lot of campaigns about making stalking a crime that's taken seriously and one that's treated differently from other crimes. And I think massive improvements have come in since sort of the bad old days. But I mean, when I was at university, there was no unwanted attention was something that you lived with, and you didn't sort of think of complaining about it if somebody was bothering you. Like, you would never have gone to anyone and said, oh, you know, somebody is following me around, or somebody won't leave me alone, or won't listen to me when I say, you know, I'm not interested in you. It was kind of like, that was a romantic idea. It wasn't something to be worried about. And I think we have come a long way since, you know, in the last 20 years, about seeing it as being less romantic and maybe more threatening, and not something to treat lightly at all.
Yeah, I don't really think I'd find it romantic if there was someone lurking around my house.
I mean, you'd be surprised. This is the thing. I think for the stalkers, they think they're in a romantic comedy, and everyone else thinks it's a psychological thriller. And I think that's why I really liked writing John Webster, because he absolutely does see himself as the hero.
Yeah,
and really quite a dashing hero. And yeah, quite a grim person.
Yeah, and I don't want to, you know, again, give anything away, but I did find that final, is it the final chapter? You know, but yes, it's the final. No, it's not quite the penultimate chapter. Whereas there's the confrontation with him, and he kind of you get a real sense of what he thinks of himself and what he's done, and yeah, it's just that was quite an insight into a very warped mind, and I mean that about him, and obviously not about your warped author.
Not creative.
And talking of warped minds, Harriet, where on earth? I mean, we talked a bit about, you know, composite character and everything, but you know, Julia Burnett is just such a. I just don't know how to. She's just such a villain, you know. She's so wonderful. You know, if you haven't read the book, Julia Burnett's the queen bee of the school, isn't she? You know, kind of chair of the PTA and you know, mistress of all that she surveys. What you know, how did you come up with that, and how did you know how far you could go with her?
I just was having fun. Actually, that was it, and I just thought, let's see how far I can push this, and how unpleasant I can make her. Because quite honestly, I think we've all met, and there is something sometimes about all women contingents that it can be marvelously supportive, but it can also bring out there's a competitive aspect that isn't necessarily terribly healthy, and and a lot of passive aggression that comes over. And it's never quite, you know, as bad as being punched in the face, but sometimes it's worse in a way, because it's sort of mental violence. And I sort of drew, I mean, in terms of it was almost looking back to the playground, because I think that when we meet situations where we're being sort of ostracized by groups, we are triggered back to how it felt when we were kids, and what it was like not to be picked for a team, or not to be invited to a party, or, you know, whatever it might be. And, you know, you sort of think about those girls then, and actually it's what I'm sure they've grown up into. I mean, some of them will have redeemed themselves, but a lot of them won't, and a lot of them will just put on the same patterns of behavior that they had from before. And you know, you take it and you think, well, how can I make this? It's not going to be interesting if it's just at the sort of the level that it really exists. You do need to sort of make it more murderous and more threatening in order for it to be a psychological thriller. But it's there was an aspect of reality at the heart of it. And, you know, I shan't bore you with my list of people who've dissed me at the school gate, but, you know, I could. So it's that's where it gets drawn from, you know.
I just find this so fascinating, because I kind of, you know, whenever I'm dropping the kids off or picking them up at school, I just blithely walk in. I'm completely unaware of the politics, and
I'm just neurotic, Adam. I'm really neurotic, and I get quite socially anxious, and I just, you know, and it's just there as this very fraught, you know, and you're worried about your kids anyway, and then it all kind of builds up and up into this great big horror show where, you know, you're convinced everyone hates you, and that's not actually true at all. They're not thinking about you, they're thinking about what they're doing. But you know, you can create a psychodrama just, you know, waiting half an hour for football to finish, and you know, why not put it on the page?
Oh no, I think you're completely normal, because I'll come back home and my wife Amy will say, oh, you know, so and so's left her husband for you know, and this guy's been cheating on his wife, and this is all, you know, and that was her. I'm just completely blind to it all. So it was fascinating to kind of, oh wow, that's actually what's happening at our school. You know, it was
I
fascinating.
really hope not that much. That would be really
well, not the super
massive
bad.
for that would be social services. I think would need to be involved at this
not
point, quite honestly.
Extreme, but yeah.
I was always entirely oblivious to picking up. My kids are 24 and 21 now, so long past that period. But surely there would have been a Julia Barnett equivalent, the head of the PTA, who's reading this book now, thinking, has Harriet based this on me?
I think that people, I was looking at some authors I know in America were having a chat today about how on Twitter about how people don't really recognize themselves. I mean, you don't tend to read it thinking, I bet I'm the villain. You know, I mean, that's not how if people realize that was how they behave, then they wouldn't do it, you'd think. And so actually, if they do work out it's them, and it isn't them because there's lots of thems, but I think it would be doing a public service, and it would be doing a service to their children, because quite honestly, you know, if they're doing anything remotely similar, they should just stop it. It's unbearable. But, you know, and also they've left the schools. There was not a coincidence in the timing of the writing of the book with them being at secondary school and it not being my problem anymore. So
I think it's very hard sometimes to weave in a real person into a fictional work as well. You know, that it's quite difficult to make them line up in the cast of characters well. So it's quite good to have, you know, to turn them into a fictional character rather than trying to put them straight into a book. So I don't think you're based on one person, Harry. It's okay. I'll stand up to you in court.
Lots of people, most of whom aren't even real. That's you won't know them. They go to a different school.
It's the feelings that it gives you, isn't it? It's like taking those small feelings and making them into something much bigger for the sake of the book. But that like pang of, you know, uncertainty and feeling threatened, you know, it drives a lot of crime fiction.
Yeah.
Jane, you know, this is it's kind of, I guess it's an author's question, but I'm hoping it'll be of interest to readers and everyone really. What, you know, when you've got an idea for, you know, a book like The Killing Kind, I'm sure you have lots of ideas. You get lots of inspiration from the world around you and everything. How do you know that you've got an idea that you want to, you know, run with? What was it about this particular idea that you've, you know, because when you're, you know, as an author, you're going to spend a year of your life writing a book and, you know, longer talking about it and promoting it. And you'll have people coming up to you maybe 5-10 years after you wrote it and talking to you about it. What was it about this particular idea that you know, drove you to want to write it, and how do you kind of know that you've picked something that's you know, got that sort of X factor that keeps you excited and interested in it?
I usually, you know, I'm lucky that I generally write a book a year and have a contract to write that amount, and so my writing time is actually quite planned out in advance. So I'll sort of sit on a book idea for 2 or 3 years before I get a slot to write it. And over that 2 or 3 years, I'll find it's in the back of my mind. I can kind of drop back into it at any moment and sort of toy around with it. And often I really want to write it instead of whatever it is I'm supposed to be writing. But it develops over that time. And some of them don't. Some of them start off as an amazing idea and you're really excited about them. And then 3 years later, you're thinking, this was a short story if it was anything, and maybe I'll just leave that in the ideas folder and not come back to it. So yeah, I think it's all about sort of giving it the space and the time to develop into something that is a full idea. And it's complicated. Sometimes you just need one extra detail to pop into your head, or one character, or you know, for this book, I read, there's a great book by Elizabeth Haynes called Into the Darkest Corner, which is about a stalker. It's an absolutely brilliant psychological thriller that she wrote a few years ago. And I'd read it before, and I read it again while I was sort of thinking about this and writing about it, mainly because I didn't want to imitate it, because I think that's always a fear. If you read a lot of crime, that you're going to sort of end up taking something and putting it on the page. And what really helped was thinking how different her main character was from Ingrid, and how Ingrid's reaction to things was so personal to her, and that just made her come alive for me in my head. So I've said it to Elizabeth as well, that it was a huge help. It was the thing that just brought her to life for me. But that's, you know, unless I believe in the characters and unless I have enough plot to be interested and to feel that it's got a life of its own, then I don't put my finger on my keyboard to write anything.
And Harriet, do you fundamentally believe that we should fear strangers? Because obviously, you know, in fact, both books deal with this idea of the, you know, a stranger or somebody that you've had enforced contact with coming into your life and wreaking havoc. Do you fundamentally believe that, you know, kind of strangers are people to be feared? Are they?
No.
You know, do you think that people are inherently bad, basically? Because we write about bad people a lot in crime.
Make a thriller good, it has to be.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's, yeah, you people your books with the people you hope that you don't meet in real life. But no, I don't think that people are inherently bad. Some people are, obviously, but, you know, in the majority, no. And actually, that was there's a sort of pivotal scene in the book where Sadie makes a decision to trust where she shouldn't have made that decision. But actually, normally the moment that you start at school when the kids are small and you make friends with the other parents, you're leaving your kids at their house all the time. It's like, great, someone's actually prepared to have them for a sleepover. That's brilliant. We don't need to, you know, we've got someone else to help out. And you know, you don't actually, yeah, you're not sort of asking for a DBS check and checking them out with references before you let your child go and be there for. And, you know, you would be weird if you were to do that. The few times I've had parents that have, you know, seeming to be asking me questions of a more searching nature before allowing their little treasures to come to me, have, you know, it's always put my back up too. And I think that there is, you know, there is a I can't think of the word, I'm having a blank, but, you know, that we should all just trust each other within that context, that there's an assumption of trust. That's what I meant to say. There's an assumption of trust within the same school or within the same community. And without that, you can't operate, because you are just going to be sitting looking over your shoulder all the time. And I mean, in some ways, you know, without bringing the pandemic too much into it, that has been one of the saddest things, has been this everyone out there now is potentially a threat, is potentially breathing on us and that, I think, has been, you know, the greatest tragedy, that you can't now feel sort of complete trust about going into a room full of strangers who could potentially become friends, that there is this sort of feeling of threat that hangs over it. And I think that's been one of the greatest losses of this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's I think feeling that you might be a threat to people.
Absolutely.
That's the other thing, you know, as somebody who's like hardly intimidating in any way, and very, like, you know, I try and set people at their ease and everything else, and suddenly realizing actually I could be putting you in danger without knowing this. It's quite a shocking thing to realize and to sort of come to terms with. And you know, making your own behavior fit, trying to make sure that people are comfortable with your own behavior. Actually, it gave me a real insight into how I remember getting in trouble on Twitter once because I said it was really intimidating when men walked up behind you when you were walking on the street late at night, and that it was really kind if people would think of crossing the road rather than coming up behind you, even if they're just planning to walk past and they're not, you know, they've no negative intentions or anything. And people reacted really badly. They thought that this was a very unfair thing to ask, and to assume that everybody was a threat, and, you know, that it reflected badly on me. And, you know, obviously you can talk about that until the cows come home, but it made me realize that to be perceived as a threat is actually quite a damaging thing. And, you know, to be, through your own actions, through your maybe slight thoughtlessness, upsetting people is upsetting for you as well. So yeah, it's been interesting from that point of view.
Yeah.
I remember that controversy, that particular Twitter controversy. I remember it.
It was, you know, they're always interesting.
Yeah, and I, to be honest, I thought you were right. I'll often, you know, cross over the road, or because I'm aware, you know, as guys have a very different experience of the world. And I was actually going to say, you know, I think it's one of the things that, you know, about psychological thrillers that, you know, that makes them so popular is that they're, you know, all of them more or less are set in a very safe space. And what you were talking about, this idea that we should all trust each other, Harriet, with our children, which we do, you're absolutely right. You send your kids off to go and stay with or play with people who you've never met. And you just kind of assume. And the idea of a malevolent force coming into that environment of trust is really terrifying. But it's at the heart of, psychological thrillers. And it's this idea of, people abusing what should be a safe environment. And I think it's something that, guys don't experience a lot of in their lives, for the various reasons that have been discussed, at length on Twitter. But I just think, I think this idea of, we're now all strangers and potential dangers to each other. Do you think that's going to feed through into, Jane, I'll ask you, do you think that's going to feed through into your work in any way? Is that the kind of psychology of this pandemic, is that going to change the landscape at all for you?
I mean, I think so, but I don't know yet how. Like, I don't have a lockdown novel brewing in the back of my mind, I'm very pleased to say. I have read a really good one, and I think people will do amazing lockdown novels, but it's not something that I'm planning on doing. But I think all of these experiences are going to shape us for years. We have been living through a period of a lot of peace in this part of the world. We've benefited from good healthcare, good education, living somewhere fairly wealthy, and generally, not having to struggle too much to live. And it's been quite an unsettling thing to realize how fragile all of that is and how quickly that can go away. And I know we were all laughing about sort of the supermarkets being emptied and panic buying, but I found it one of the most upsetting things about the sort of the early days of the pandemic was, seeing elderly people trying to fill their shopping baskets and everything was gone. And yet I was in the supermarket to buy things for my family. So, I think all these little sort of jolts of reality are going to make it into fiction in one way or another.
Yeah, there were poignant moments during the lockdown, and seeing the Yorkshire nurse crying into the camera. It was in York, wasn't it? Which is actually my hometown, and was a particularly poignant moment, I think. I mean, as a point, I didn't go to the shops at all for probably a week around that time, just because I'd rather have gone without. But I just found it was ridiculous. Yeah. I've got Vanessa Edwards has asked a question. One for Harriet. You mentioned you're just before we started recording. For those people who are watching on YouTube, Harriet was mentioning she was editing her next novel. Can you give us any hints about it? Which I'm sure that would have been a question from Adam later.
It starts with a body impaled on railings outside a house in Edinburgh's Newtown after a New Year party, which has gone a bit wrong, and it's about what's led to the impalement, essentially, and it's about friendship, and it's about it has quite a lot set in 1990 Edinburgh, when I was in sixth form in Edinburgh. And in fact, my editor said to me, we feel that much as you've had fun writing all this, there's an awful lot of drinking and shagging, and can you please take out some of it so that we just get to the main important scenes? And I was like, oh, okay. But actually writing it over the last month, particularly at the beginning of this year, was such a lovely escape of just being in a completely, a huge nostalgia, but actually it was happy nostalgia. It's sort of being back in a place where, there just weren't any of the kind of adult fears and, life, all of the horrible things that happen in life now, just completely to sort of run away from it. So sadly, I'm doing quite a lot of cutting of that, but it was good fun to write. And I found Lies, aspects of Lies were fun to write, but it was a hard book, and it was hard sort of doing the second book with the whole sort of pressure of Blood Orange hanging over me, and that sort of level of, it was the first time I'd written to an expected audience, as opposed to Blood Orange, which, I wrote on an MA course, not thinking anyone would read it beyond, my cohort of students. So it was nice to be able to sort of go back to feeling some joy in writing again, and actually the escapism that's always the very good bit that comes from it. It's not a police procedural, but it's a sort of that we start with the body and then we go backwards, and I think it's fun. I hope other people will find it fun, but I enjoyed it anyway.
Fantastic. And actually, Vanessa went on to ask one for Jane. Is Maeve Kerrigan coming back after her time out in New York? I think she was unsure whether that was where it was left in the storyline. Is that correct?
She wasn't in New York, but now I'm thinking maybe she should go there for a long weekend and I could go and do some research, and that would be fantastic. No, she's coming back. She's going to be coming back next year. I don't know exactly when yet. And I think slightly influenced by pandemic experiences, I didn't really want to write another sort of police procedural. I'm always looking for ways to play around with the format. And so this time she is going to be undercover with Josh Derwent, and they are going to be investigating something that hopefully, if it all works out, you won't be quite sure what's going on until quite a late stage of the book, but it's very enjoyable to write.
Fantastic. Yeah. And are you guys mentioning the pandemic in your books at all? Are you referencing it? Are you?
No.
I'm just interested. Actually, not just completely.
I've got one because mine the sort of, I mean, it's 2019 and 1990, and I did that deliberately because I like the idea of the turn to the new year, and it's a sort of that horrible dramatic irony of everyone as it became 2020 of Happy New Year and the fireworks. And actually, it was really watching, because I've sort of spent some time watching YouTube firework display above the castle, the Hogmanay party, and I'm just there going, you fools, oh my God, you don't know. And it's just, don't just all go into your houses and shut your doors and none of this will happen. And so I think at one point I say, there's these stories coming out of China about these fires. It's not going to turn into anything, because that was like a little Easter egg for myself. But I didn't feel last year like doing anything that was set last year. I couldn't. It may be in time I'll have processed it enough to be able to. I mean, if someone has managed to do, I've seen a few novels are coming out, and if people have managed to do that and have managed to process it enough to write it, I really admire that. Emotionally, I'm just not there yet, and I can't quite work out how I would do it. But I think it's going to be impossible to ignore it, though. You can't just write about the world as it was for the rest of time.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where it feels too big to sort of slip into a kind of an aside. That's having it sort of coming up lurking in the background is one thing, but to sort of go like, oh God, do you remember last year when we were all stuck in our houses all the time, would feel so wrong. I think if you're going to mention it, then you have to sort of make it the focus of what you're writing about. And I have, as I say, Catherine Ryan Howard has written one which is absolutely brilliant and really captures the feeling that you had at the beginning and the uncertainty and the sort of weird kind of paranoia, but should we be worried about this? That sort of almost laughing it off effects that it had on us right at the beginning. But I'm very lucky with the Maeve Kerrigan series because I lost track of the timeline some time ago, and I have no idea what year it should actually be or when anything is happening. And there are beautiful readers who have gone through it and have worked out what happens when, and have kind of come and said, you do realize that you skipped 3 years here, and then this child should be this age, and this, I just think, well, it'll all get straightened out sometime, or it won't.
I love that. That's brilliant.
It's not my forte. I mean, I really struggle with keeping the timeline within a novel. So doing it over 9 books as it is, and I don't know, 10 books now. I couldn't
even begin. I look at series and I just feel such admiration at people managing to keep all the different bits in their head. And I mean, I can't remember people's names from the beginning to the end of it's like they switch halfway, and that's just in 90,000 words. No, I couldn't do that.
Is it also
okay, but
is it also quite weird to be writing about maybe a busy rush hour scene or a busy office or something when we're all stuck at home? I don't know, in terms of what you're writing about. I was reading Simon Mayo's thriller that came out in paperback. Knife Age, that was it, and that involves rush hour traffic, rush hour, all sorts, and it's kind of weird, and the busy newsroom, and it was kind of weird reading it, thinking this is a different world to where we are now.
Oh no, it's okay. The traffic's back. They've put low traffic networks all around where I live, so all the side streets are shut off, and you're there on your artery roads, and traffic jams are back. It's exactly like it was before, and worse. So I don't feel that things have changed all that much.
I've got a bit of a schizophrenic approach at the moment. I write with the private series with James Patterson. We completely ignore the pandemic. It's as though it never happened. So you're kind of writing the world as it was. But with my own series, I made a decision right at the beginning of it that I was actually going to write about the world as it is. And then as I started writing Red Wolves, which is the next book that comes out in July, I handed that in last March, I want to say. And I thought I'm going to have to try and hit a moving target and imagine where the world's going to be around April of this year. And
did you get it right?
I got rapid testing, lateral flow testing. Almost. I got rapid lateral flow testing in there, and some degree of vaccination, and things are a little bit strange. So I'm reasonably happy with where I pitched it.
Did you get Dominic Cummings?
I put a note.
Did you get 7 hours of Dominic Cummings though giving evidence? Because I
Dominic
feel
Cummings,
that was a salient
the
detail
grenade,
that should have been.
Well, I didn't mention him because the book's set in America, but yes, I was sort of aware of the madness that was going on in the government at the time when the pandemic was on its way in. But that's another whole other topic. But I mean, what's it been like for you, Harriet, writing in this time? It obviously sounds like you've been on an escapist journey.
It was, I think it's been, I mean, I have to say, I think it's actually been quite good for me because I've had to learn how to write in the same house as my family, because before I could only ever work if no one else was here because I just was being weird about it. It's sort of, and you have to get over that kind of preciousness because I can't, where are they meant to be? So I sorted out my study because I like writing in bed, and which is terrible for your back, and also because it's opposite the room my husband was working in, so he kept coming in and then going into the loo, and I was there going, you are completely breaking my flow, and this is just, and so I was like, no, sort yourself out properly, sort out a desk, actually go and work at a desk. And now I'm sort of peripheral to people, but they can come in and talk to me, but I can do it, and so that was a really good development. And I just realized that I have to write 1,000 words a day, and that's just what I've got to get done, and then I've got to make lunch for everybody and then supper, and I think because it was so hard when the children were at home, and not because it was just miserable, and teenagers shouldn't be living at home all the time, they need to be at school. And so as they went back to work, and as my husband stopped working from home, and as it emptied out, the improvement of conditions just meant that it became easier and easier. And if you make something really difficult first and then you make it easier afterwards, it's really easy. So actually it was okay, but I couldn't have done it back at the beginning. I couldn't have actually done sort of the creating aspect if it had been March of last year. Then I was editing, and that was fine because, it's a different part of your brain. It's only been as things became a little bit more, I'm not going to say normal, but we got used to them, didn't we? We've sort of adapted in how we have to live, and that made it a bit more straightforward.
Ellen's come back just with a comment really about Jane's earlier thing. This is a reader's perspective. I'm so glad people write series. I love them. That's one of the reasons I first started reading Jane's novels. So Jane, you've got a fan there.
Oh, very nice. I think the world is definitely divided into people who like a standalone book and people who like a long series to, really immerse themselves in and go through. And God bless the people who like reading from book one to the end. We love them.
We see it in the bookshop all the time. And And you know, when someone buys the first Stuart McBride, you think, right, I'll just get the second one in ready for. and honestly, in fact, lockdown, I had one customer. He did all 13 Stuart McBrides in which that's good going. You know, you've got to recommend that. And then they're forever coming. It's right. I've run out of series. What's my next one?
There's a little group of us who sort of recommend each other when people get to the last one in our series, and then they get in touch with you on Twitter and go, I finished them. What do I do now? I don't know what to read. And so we just have, okay, well, you can read this, you can read this. This one is going to be okay. That will tide you over. That's fine. You'll enjoy it. So I think if you get really into a series, you sort of live with the characters and they become part of your life. And it's hard when you get to the last book in the series, and especially when the author then goes off and writes a standalone instead of getting on with this and writing book 10. Then, it's difficult for readers sometimes, waiting patiently.
Yeah, very true.
And, Harriet's told us what she's working on next. What are you doing next, Jane?
I'm doing some TV stuff that may not happen in the great tradition of TV things, and I'm trying to work on the Maeve 10. That's sort of my current thing. I mean, I think this year has been very hit and miss for me. I had quite a lot of stuff happen in my personal life. My mother died. That was not very positive for the point of view of work, as well as everything else. And also just having the children off school for a lot of time. And I found it quite hard to I think writing is a bit like exercise, and if you do it every day, then you see the benefits. And if you kind of pop in and do a bit and then have to divert your attention to somewhere else and do that for a couple of weeks and then come back again, you're not going to see the same sort of output or have the same pleasure in it, or it's going to feel like more of a struggle. So that's sort of where I am. I am hoping that the next few months are going to be good writing time.
Yeah, I think probably the first 6 months of last year, I was just like, oh my God, just looking at the, just the emotional distraction of it. It was very hard to kind of give, you just didn't have the space for other characters and there was just something so huge happening in the world. It was very hard to make space for something fictional and, to try and bring characters to life. So I completely understand, and condolences about your, your mother but
I think this is something.
It's been a very difficult year, I think.
Well, this is it. I mean, I think loads of people have had this experience this last year of having this very strange, something big and important happens in their personal life, and then nothing happens the way that it should because of the pandemic. That you don't get to have the same, what you might have expected from the funeral or from sort of the time after that. And we're all just sort of finding our way, I think. No one can look into the future at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting time.
Are you able to talk about the TV thing that may or may not happen? And are you able to give any more about that?
Not really. Is that very boring?
No, it's one of those TV things. I know what that's like.
I think this is the thing with TV. Like my feeling about it never happens. So you might as well just enjoy the experience and get as much as you can out of, dealing with really interesting people. And just, anything that makes it onto TV, I feel is like a 1 in a million shot. There are a lot of authors out there crossing their fingers for Netflix, and I'm sure we've all been in that position. So yeah, keep your fingers crossed, everyone.
Have the TV people come knocking for you? And they do actually, for anyone who doesn't know, they do go around in a gang. They are the TV people. They go around in a gang and knock on authors' doors and take books away from them. Yeah. Have the TV?
So Blood Orange was optioned, is still under option by World Productions, which is great. But the everything that was being done in development was with a new streaming company called Quibi that was due to launch in April of last year. And the basis of Quibi, the whole thing was predicated on it being 10-minute episodes that you would watch on your phone for the commute to work. And at the moment at which it was launched was the moment when, it doesn't take 10 minutes to get from your bed down to your kitchen and back to your bed again. Well, I mean, unless you've got a really big house, and you're not going to be staring at your phone. So Quibi kind of bit the dust. And so we shall see. We shall see. But I think that, yes, my feeling is that it's I wanted to write books, and if anything were ever to make it to the screen, that would be amazing. But focusing on the bits that I can do and I know how to do, and just enjoy the idea. It's like you buy a lottery ticket, and for the 5 minutes after you buy the lottery ticket, it's like brilliant, because you've just done so much and changed the world so much, and then after that you kind of forget it, and it's just that momentary sort of buzz of hope, which is it's lovely to have. The hope's always fun. Even if it dies, it's fine.
Yeah. That is it. I mean, I feel like if you write books, then you've had a crack at telling your story anyway. So I think it must be soul destroying to be a script writer and just do speculative scripts or things that don't get made, and just kind of keep working and not having anything actually make it into the public eye. And so I can see why a lot of them end up coming to the book world, where at least people will read you. You have total control, and nobody can cast somebody you don't like in your beautiful book.
Yes, exactly. That's, I think, the right way of looking at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can speak to that from experience, because I started off screenwriting, and it is disheartening, because often it can be things that you have no control over. I remember working on a project, and the person that was going to champion my script and was going to take it on was removed from his position as a result of a blood vendetta that went back 15 years.
Wow.
Somebody got into position above him and settled a score after 15 years. They've been waiting 15 years to settle a score with this person for a betrayal.
That's perfectly normal.
That was kind of.
I think that 15 years, that's no time. Totally normal. Yeah.
Feels like there's a book in that.
Yeah, it was.
No, you sit on the river, the bank of the river, for long enough, the bodies of your enemies will flow past. It's nothing. Revenge is great.
And Adam, what are you working on whilst we're here? What are you working on?
What am I working on? I am about to start my third book with James Patterson, and I've got edits for the book that's coming out next September, which is it's a departure for me. It's more of a kind of Matt Haig, David Mitchell kind of novel. It's more of a speculative fiction book, which is I'm going to be very interested to see how people respond to it, because it's a real step outside of what I normally do. But I shouldn't actually even be talking about it. It just occurred to me. We haven't actually officially announced it, so yes, you're getting a bit of
preview, sneak preview.
A bit of sneak news. Yeah, we've literally just sold it to the States and in the UK, and I shouldn't be talking about it. So forget that. I'm not doing that. I'm just working on a book with James Patterson, which is Private Beijing. Cool. Oh. I'm in charge, aren't I?
Yes. We're looking at you, waiting for another question, Adam.
Remain in charge.
You know what, though?
We've only got 5 minutes left, so...
I think at this point, if I run out of things to say, I just...
That's cheating. You're not allowed to do that.
So I'm going to go to some kind of... I'm going to go to a meta-writerly... what do you think people have got out? Because reading has just exploded during the pandemic. Harriet, what do you think people have got out other than a distraction? What are we giving people?
Escape, I think. I think it is escape. Because at the beginning, last March, and I just sat there thinking, I'm the most futile waste of space in the world, because I just sit in bed and make this stuff up, and I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm not doing anything useful. And then I started to get messages through from NHS workers saying how much they'd like reading Blood Orange, because it had taken them away from what was a very grim reality. And that was yeah, that was an amazing moment to think, my God, I've actually, I have brought something to the table here. And maybe I'm just the sort of the tap dancer, doing the tour of the trenches. But, people need, I think, entertainment, distraction, the ability to use their imagination to think about something else other than the horror. Because if all you are doing is the doom scrolling, it's incredibly bad for your mental health. So, I mean, once I was able to read again, and it did take me about, I'm going to say maybe 2-3 months until I was able to read last year, because again, just the phone and the news. I then really sort of threw myself into it because it was just so nice to be somewhere else just for a bit and to be normal, even if it was only imaginary. So I would say escape.
Yeah, I think being able to concentrate on something for a long period of time is incredibly good for you, and very difficult to achieve. And usually, if you're watching TV, it's very easy to get distracted because you can half listen and you can be doing something else at the same time, unless it is a Scandinavian crime drama, in which case you are glued to it and reading everything on screen, and that's why I like them. But just to have that kind of pure and total concentration and to lose yourself in something. And I remember, I think stress makes you very jittery and makes it very hard for you to have that sustained concentration. And I think when people discovered that they could get it through reading, that was something that really made a huge difference to them. And I hope that it's something that people will kind of still remain interested in. And also audiobooks. I think audiobooks have been huge for people because it's company, and as you're trotting around doing your jobs or going for your soulless walk or whatever it was that we were all doing during the pandemic, you'd have someone's voice telling you a nice story, and that was a really lovely thing. I think big discovery for me.
Well, I would never encourage audiobooks myself, but as a bookshop owner, having said that, there are one or two who do say they get the audiobook and they buy the book because they use the audiobook as a way of getting into the book in the first place, in the first 2 chapters or so. And it's
the only way I can bring myself to do any exercise. I mean, I hate exercise. And I'm so bored of the walk, the walk from my house now. I'd rather shoot myself than do it again. But so I've got the book to read at home, and then I'll listen on Audible when I go for a walk, and it gives me an incentive because I keep going with the story and I'm not wasting time not reading. I think that they're, as a supplement to books, obviously books are the main big proper thing, but as a supplement they do serve a very, very good purpose.
I don't like listening to audiobooks that I haven't read. I use them to reread things. Cool. It's books that I really like that I'll listen to because I find that quite soothing. But I always buy the book from the bookshop.
Pauline's put a comment. Jane loved your series, read it all twice. I suspect she needs the audiobook, frankly, if she can't read it the third time. Who's the voice of your audiobooks, dare I ask? I don't even want to be talking about this, frankly, but yeah.
I've forgotten her name. I've suddenly gone blank, and she's so lovely. Caroline.
Caroline, that's close enough.
She's so lovely and she's so brilliant. And people get really attached with the series. They get really attached to whoever reads the books. And you can't change the narrator because that is the voice of the books. And so I actually had a different narrator in America, and then they switched to using Caroline for both. And people in America were furious because they were like, this is not, this is like a whole new thing that I'm having to listen to. This is not the same character.
So you have to pick a sort of mid-Atlantic voice, or are the Americans very happy with an English voice?
I think she's Irish. I think they're quite happy. They're quite used to her.
Of course. Yeah. Harriet, who's the voice of your book, Harriet?
The first one was read by someone called Judy Teal, an actress, and the second by an actress called Sarah Durham. And I'm told they both did a really good job, but I find that I can't listen to it because it's my reading aloud. If I hear it, I just feel like I'm being flayed. It's incredibly painful because it's just too, I don't know why. I mean, I guess it's too exposing or something. It's just weird. So I have had to rely on a friend of mine who's very keen on audiobooks when she goes for walks. So she says they're very good. So I'm happy with that. Someone's come in the defense of audiobooks. Don't devalue audiobooks. My son was an avid reader, but
has suffered sight loss, which is a very much different argument. He would be lost without audiobooks. Entirely agree with that. And,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
They are a real
absolutely.
lifeline.
It's 8 o'clock. It hasn't time flown, but listen, we've got both these books. I suspect quite a few of you had one or two already, because there's a few people who came in on a ticket only system, which is absolutely fine. That's part of the value of putting these on. Thank you to Harriet. Thank you, Jane. Adam, thank you so much for your time. And thank all the audience and to all people who will watch it in the future. So
and thank you, Ben, for organising it. It's nice.
Yes.
To,
Thank you, Ben.
take part in
lovely.
like this. And
well, hopefully.
Well, I'm gonna just say I recommend both books very highly. If you haven't read them, get them both. They're really, really good. And full of twists and turns and surprises, and really enjoyed them.
Emily says thank you, and thank you all, and maybe we can I can meet one, two, or all three of you at some point in a physical event at some point.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much indeed for having me. It's been great.
Look after yourself and have a good day, guys. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.